matters.
My point was from First Timothy 4:15.
First Timothy.
Yeah, First Timothy 4:15.
Okay.
Be diligent in these matters. Give yourself.
Wait, 1 second now. Pastor, wait now. Let's read it. First, let's open. First Timothy 4 verse
15.
15.
Yeah,
Okay.
already.
Okay.
Be diligent in this matter. Give yourself wholly to them, so that everyone might see your progress. Watch your life and doctrine closely. Persevere in them, because if you do, you will save both yourself and your hearers. I think this context, it wasn't necessarily about his commitment to God, but also like to everyone around him and something like that. Watch your life and your doctrine closely. And earlier part, I said that everyone may see your progress. So there is still that, my own thought though, there is still that human or man judgment, in quotes. Yeah.
That's an interesting thought. Actually, you know, the name Immerse that we gave this group came from that passage, especially from that verse 15 that you just read in the Message translation. It says, cultivate these things. And of course, by that, it was talking of things he has been speaking up from, I think, around verse 12, let no man despise your youth and things like that.
Yeah.
Cultivate these things. Immerse yourself in them. That's where we got immerse from. Immerse yourself in them. Then the people will all see you mature right before their eyes. Keep a firm grasp on both your character and your teaching. Don't be diverted. Just keep at it. Both you and those who hear you will experience salvation.
This what chapter is that?
First Timothy chapter 4.
Verse 17.
I've just read 15 to 16 actually. First Timothy chapter 4.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, Dr. Mrs. Hello, husband, woman.
How is everyone doing?
I'm fine. How about you?
Exam.
Doing well too.
So how's the exam going? The main Pastor Mrs. The only wife of Pastor Ola.
Which guy?
The wife of her youth.
Pastor, the only husband, man. Hello, husband, woman.
Hello, Sanu.
It's good to see you. Good evening, everyone. Sorry.
Good evening.
So we are dissecting Second Timothy, First Timothy 4. So Henry, what was your point? Sorry, I was distracted a bit trying to shoot.
6 more hours. I think Henry is basically saying that, I mean, if you look at the last part of that verse 15, in many translations, it's talking about being able to see, quote and unquote, your good works, your righteousness. You know, we're talking about self-righteousness versus God's righteousness. And he's saying that he thinks that we still need the self-righteousness part and then corroborating it with this particular scripture. Is that right? Did I capture your thought?
Yep, exactly.
If I could say a little bit more on that as well, especially both from the fact that we are studying Romans at the moment, and the theme of righteousness runs through the book of Romans. So even though we are still in chapter 3, we've begun to unpack what that looks like right from chapter 1. And the thesis so far, the way Paul wrote Romans, his argument in the first 3 chapters is to make a simple point that every single one of us, the best of us, the worst of us, no one is able to attain the kind of righteousness that God expects of humanity, that God demands, that God's justice, God's holiness, God's righteousness, or to put it like this, the standard of righteousness of God, none of us can meet up to it. So it starts in chapter 1 by looking at Gentiles, those that were never even in God's covenant, in a manner of speaking, those that practice idolatry and all those other things. And and just unpacks the fact that they've gone, no matter, it's obvious that they cannot retain the capacity to please God on their own. Then it comes in chapter 2 to twist that and focus on those that focus on rules, moralists. And a bit of that even in chapter 3, Judaizers, those that are Jewish and that believe that by the mere fact that I'm a Jewish person, I'm righteous. So it covers basically the whole fabric of all kinds of human beings that you ever see. Those that say there is no God, the atheists, the secular kind of person, or the person that thinks he keeps the law very well and so he's good with God. And it brings all of that together in chapter 3, verse 10. There is none, not even one. And then it goes down in chapter 3, verse 23 to say, for all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. In other words, no one is able to measure up to that standard. And if you would remember, Jesus said something really funny in Matthew chapter 5. Let's quickly look at it. And since we are opening Bibles, we can as well open Bible for that. I think it's Matthew 5:20. I'm checking here. Yep, it's Matthew chapter 5, verse 20. I'll first of all read it from King James Version, which will sound familiar to most of us, probably, and then read it from a couple other translations. In the KJV, Jesus said, this is the Sermon on the Mount, of course, Matthew 5, from Matthew 5 to 7. That was Jesus's first public message, if you will. And he says, for I say unto you that except your righteousness shall exceed the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, ye shall in no case enter into the kingdom of heaven. That's the KJV. So Jesus again is making the same point you are making, Kingsley, that it seems like there are different kinds of righteousnesses, if we could speak like that. Jesus here is saying that except our righteousness, of course, he's speaking to a Jewish audience, but he's telling them that except their righteousness exceeds that of the best, that of the leaders amongst the Jews, who are the Pharisees and the scribes, except your righteousness exceeds that, you can't enter into the kingdom of heaven. And what that would have sounded like to the Jewish audience would be, then who can enter into the kingdom of heaven? Because the Pharisees are like the professors of law. They are the ones that are, more than any other person, finicky about obeying all the rules, about doing everything in the 10 Commandments and the hundreds of other injunctions that God has given for the Jewish race. And so it's almost like saying, this is not possible. We can't do this. Who can do it? And so if we continue reading that Matthew 5, Jesus begins to unpack further and further what he actually meant. So he started by poking holes in those laws from the Old Testament. He said, you have heard that which was said, that thou shalt not commit adultery. He's making them see how they've come to understand the law and how they've come to understand that they are righteous. And he wants them to see the fact that no matter how much you think you are keeping the law, no matter how much you think you are self-righteous, you are still not as righteous as God expects you to be. But of course, this is just half of the coin. I'm still coming to where Dr. Henry is coming from, which is also very important. And so Jesus started taking those laws one by one, at least the major ones. You have heard that they said, thou shalt not commit adultery. And indeed, as long as you don't sleep with another person's wife, you've not committed adultery. That's their understanding. But Jesus said, me, I say unto you, that if you look at a woman lustfully, you've already committed adultery with her in your heart, even though you've not physically slept with her. So at the end of the day, even though you kept the law, you have not met up with the standard of the law or the standard that God expects of you. He moves on to maybe a more serious offense, depending on how you want to rate it, that you've heard that thou shalt not commit murder. But if you say unto your brother, Raka, and Raka is like a popular insult in their context, in their days. It's like someone saying, I don't know, maybe you say the word and saying something bad afterwards to you. So Jesus said, the person that speaks like that and the one that commits murder, they are literally on the same category. The person that insults someone in a very painful manner, and the one that kills, even though from their own lens or perspective, they believe We've not done anything bad. We've not violated. At least I only said he's stupid. I only said he's foolish. I didn't kill him. So I've not done anything bad. I'm still on good terms with God. But Jesus is making them see the fact that you are still as bad. And then he went on and on. I mean, just poking holes in many of those laws from the Old Testament to make them see that the standard that they have settled for is not the standard that God expects. And secondly, to also make them see that actually there is none of them that can meet up to the standard that God expects. So in other words, the only way you can have a righteousness that exceeds the righteousness of the Pharisees, according to Matthew 5:20, is actually to have the righteousness of God himself, which is what we need. That's the thesis of Paul as well in Romans 1-2-3. There is only one thing we all need. The bad news is we can't meet up. The good news is the same person that says we can't meet up because his standard is unmeetable has made himself, has made it possible, basically, paved the way for us to meet that standard simply by believing in him, simply by placing our trust in what has come to do, the death, the burial, the resurrection of Jesus Christ, and all that has purchased for us, our redemption, our sanctification, our justification, our regeneration, our adoption family, all of those things that comes with that, and ultimately that will lead to our glorification when it comes again. All of those things are part of the package that came as a result of us saying yes to Jesus. And that is how to be righteous. That is how you get the righteousness of God. That is how you get to enjoy what Isaiah was prophesying, which is where all these things started from, Isaiah 54:17. This is the heritage of the servants of God, whose righteousness is of God. What Isaiah was saying there is messianic. As of that time, nobody actually enjoys the righteousness of God in the fullness of what that statement meant. The only kind of people that can enjoy the fullness of what that statement meant, literally, are those that are living after Jesus Christ have died and resurrected and they have placed their faith in him. They are the ones that actually have the righteousness that is of God. 2 Corinthians 5:21, Paul says it so brilliantly about Jesus. He said, he that knew no sin became sin, so that whoever believes in him, you and I, can become the righteousness of God. Not just have it, we actually become it. We become so engrafted into that positional righteousness that it becomes our identity. God looks down at you, he doesn't see Henry or Kingsley or Ife or Joseph or Anno or husbandwoman or Ife or any of us. He doesn't see us again, he sees Christ. And I think that's what John 2 was saying in 1 John 4, I think around verse 18, where he says, as Jesus is, so are we in this world. As he is right now, as he is at this very moment, accepted before God, loved by God, so are we in this world, even in our unperfect, in our unsinless nature, if you will. But then, the balance to all of that is then the fact that many people, they stretch what I've said now to say, yeah, that's the deal, that's the good news. You are righteous in as much as you believe in Jesus. Positionally, you are righteous. That's the deal. Whatever you do, it doesn't matter. Nothing can undo that. But 1 Timothy 4 that we read, and very many other scriptures actually, tells us that the major evidence, the major way you can tell the difference between someone that has enjoyed, embraced, received the righteousness that is of God is that we then begin to see it in their lives. But this time around, it's no longer that they are doing it because they are trying to measure up to a standard that is set by some 10 commandments. Naturally, if you have been redeemed, regenerated, justified, adopted into God's family, sealed by the Holy Spirit, naturally, the Spirit of God begins to work in you as long as you are attached to that family and begin to lead to fruits that people can see in your life. So those fruits is also kind of righteousness. That's not the righteousness of God. It's just righteous works. It's good works. It's charitable service. They are good things that we do. But I won't call them self-righteousness because they are literally just a product of something that has happened inside of us. Self-righteousness is that kind of righteousness that existed before Jesus died, the kind of righteousness where you thought you could meet up to God's standard by how well you can obey commandments, how well you can fast. To put it in our context, how often you go to church, how well you can serve in church, how well you can do this, you can do that, with the mindset that I'm doing this so that God can love me. I'm doing this so that I can be in God's good books. I'm doing this so that I can be more acceptable to God. I'm doing this so that in that forthcoming exam, I can pass. It is no longer, the mindset is faulty in doing those kind of things. But when we understand the fact that you can't be attached to the vine, John 15, and not bear fruit. As long as you are attached to the vine and you are receiving the nutrients, you are being watered, you are being pruned, you are being cultured, as it were, you will naturally bear fruit. And Jesus himself said, by their fruits, you shall know them. So I think that's the full spectrum from my perspective of how all of this plays out. That indeed there is a righteousness of God. There are different kinds of righteousnesses. There is a self-righteousness of you trying to walk your way to God, which you will never meet up. As far as God's standard is concerned, Mother Teresa and Osama bin Laden and Adolf Hitler, minus God, minus the grace of God, minus Jesus, no matter how good one of them is or how bad the other one is, all of them are far from meeting up to the standard of God. I don't know which Bible verse says that it's like filthy rags. I think it's in 1 John 1, that all our righteousness, again, that's self-righteousness, everything that we thought we could do on our own and by ourselves to earn God's favor, it is like filthy rags, because no matter how we do them, we're still miles away from meeting up to the standard I expect. But the moment we submit and receive that beautiful gift, you're welcome, Chibuike. Good to see you. The moment and you're welcome to sing. The moment we receive that and embrace that gift, then we are enrolled, as it were, in this new contract. In this new contract whereby we are now declared righteous. But that is not the end of the story. It's a means to an end. That transaction should then begin to yield dividends. Someone should be able to look at you and wonder, there's something different about you than the version of you I knew 2 years ago. What's the difference? What's the source of that? Can I get to meet that? Someone should look at you and be able to say, you know, you used to be this, but now you are that. And even you yourself will sometimes find yourself, you just catch yourself in those moments of transformation and be like, wow, did I just react this way? Oh, this is how I would have reacted if this happened 3 years ago. This is how I would have reacted if this happened 6 years ago. But because, of course, this is not 6 years ago, this is not 3 years ago. Something has happened between then and now that is making all of us better and better. But that is not, I won't call that self-righteousness. It's a product of the righteousness of God that I've received or embraced. So I don't know if that kind of paints it a little bit more for you, Kingsley, and makes what Pastor was saying even richer, hopefully.
Yeah, that was so profound, sir. That was so profound. Sister Anu, do you want to say anything to top up what your husband just said?
I don't know what the question is, but I'm sure he's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, we are just talking about the difference between self-righteousness and God's righteousness. You know, because Isaiah, I've forgotten where Isaiah something for verse 17. No weapon fashioned against you shall prosper, because we are the heritage of God, and then we are righteousness of God. You know, sometimes the promises of God comes with some conditions, but sometimes we don't get to, because the day I saw this thing, that was just very recent, I think last week or 2 weeks ago. I'm like, I never knew that there was something attached to that, no weapon fashioned against you, because your righteousness is from the Lord. I never knew that. So the thing now got me to say, oh, that means there are different type of righteousness, you know. And I know that we have self-righteousness. And then with what Pastor has said, especially in the book of Romans, I think I'm going to start studying that Romans. And you now start seeing that you have different types of righteousness. And the Sermon on the Mount was it's something that really hits me, because the scripture in Matthew, when he said that even if you are so righteous like the scribes and all that, you will still not know the first secret of the kingdom of God. You know, you see that you cannot do it by yourself.
True.
Because when it tells you, when you look at somebody, like you talk about adultery, he went further to explain it. He said, don't commit adultery. That's the Pharisees and the scribes. They wouldn't commit adultery. That's how righteous they are. So in the eyes of men, you are very righteous. But in the eyes of God, you have looked at the woman lustfully, and then by yourself, you cannot you cannot do without that. You need to the grace of God for you to be able to live above yourself, and everything is still coming back to death to this self. So we need to get to a point where you're dead to yourself. When you see a woman and you're not looking at the person as lustfully, because if you allow your mind and feed your mind, you're going to look at the person and then it will happen to you. You understand what I mean? But because you're dead to self, some of those wouldn't happen. And then you see that that's where God's righteousness helps you.